Hi, my name is Deborah Wagner. Thank you for coming to Creating Guaranteed and Viable Curriculum. Now, when we think about guaranteed and viable, we don't always tie them to curriculum because guaranteed means a promise. In curriculum work, guaranteed curriculum means that we're promising our students good outcomes. Viable, I'm a Grey's Anatomy fan, and I always think of is the organ viable for transplant, which means that that organ was protected and it's transplanted in a timely manner. When we think about viable curriculum, we're thinking about just that. We're protecting the time so that students can learn and teachers can teach. When we think about what is a guaranteed and viable curriculum, we're really getting into the work of Marzano in his book, What Works in Schools, Translating Research into Practice. He calls a guaranteed curriculum one that ensures that all students have equal opportunity to learn. Each student will have access to effective or highly effective teacher and access to the same content, knowledge, skills in each section or in each class. Now, we know students come to us with very, very different ability levels, but we want that guarantee to be high. We want that guarantee to be rigorous. And within the curriculum, we'll create that differentiation. Now, why do we need a guaranteed and viable curriculum? To increase student outcomes. As teachers, we got into this role to increase student outcomes. We want to see successes. We want to see our students grow and become productive members of society. We want to see their smiles on their face when they've reached those goals. In order to do that, we need to look at some more reasons why. We need a consistent, guaranteed, and viable curriculum. We want to consistently provide an opportunity for every student to learn. We want to create consistency across grade level, school level, and district level. Now, we know at Hartford High School, our district level starts at 9th grade, 10th grade, 11, 12, and we go in that route, but we have feeder schools, and we're looking at improving our communications and developing relationships with our feeder schools to help that district level growth. We want to create common outcomes for our students, and we want to allow teachers to teach and students to learn. Robin Jackson states in her book how Never Work Harder Than Your Students, really goes into effective teaching strategies and reflections for teachers to grow and eventually become master teachers. And we want to include those ideas and those successes that are already research based into our curriculum. Now, one of the major barriers to the opportunity to learn is time. We hear consistently that I didn't have the time to get to this, or just before the exam, I'm going to squeak in this unit. They get it, they get it. If not, we'll take it off the exam. We're looking at developing the curriculum and the pacing so that teachers have time to prepare for effective lessons, that teachers have time to instruct effective lessons, and teachers have time to assess students, dive into that data, and see where they might need to revisit some things for intervention. We also want students to have time to receive the lessons we plan, to have time to process them, to investigate, to learn the vocabulary, to wrestle with that content and practice and apply it so that they can have time to retain and take that mastery to other classes. Now, a guaranteed and viable curriculum has needs too. It needs horizontal sequence, and in order to do that, we need time to share what needs to be learned across grade level courses. It needs a vertical sequence. In order to do that, we need time to share what needs to be learned grade level to grade level or class to class. What's happening in welding 1 that's going to carry into welding 2? What skills do they need? What learning needs to happen? We want to have a correlation of standards and assessments. So in order to do that, we need time given to align curriculum to the power standards at the state and district level. Now in our PLCs last year, we started that process. So now we want to go a little bit deeper. We want to have time to have data-driven assessments. We want time to review data, implement interventions, and provide learning opportunities for those who have already mastered that content. Sounds kind of like the work we're doing in PLC. So when we're doing that and we're looking at implementing and creating that guaranteed and viable curriculum, these aren't things that we're starting fresh over with. Some of these things are things that we're already doing. So some of the time process is going to be helpful with that. Guaranteed and viable curriculum also needs the power standards and power indicator outlined in the content, concepts being taught, and skills that need to be mastered at grade level courses. Reason why is that's going to help us provide clarity and guidance for principals, teachers, students, and parents about the core curriculum and student outcomes. Now, when we think about guaranteed and viable curriculum, we also know that there's some no options. Now, that's not what you think. If this isn't going to be curriculum where we're telling you exactly what to say every minute of your class and present it and spoon feeding the PowerPoints and the presentations and giving you that direct language. But what we are saying is there can be no option not to teach the power standards within the curriculum in your class. But there can be options in how you teach those standards. Now, remember the word viability. We want to remember that viable means that time is available and protected so that students will be able to learn the curriculum. In order to do that, we need set and pacing guides that allow for the opportunity and time frames for the material to be taught, learned successfully throughout the year. We also need to know that in our pacing guides that our daily instruction is manageable, not for just teachers, but also for students. And we need a pacing guide instruction that can be taught to mastery. Now, as we said in the pacing guides, we're going to think about cyclical teaching, which means we're going to be bringing those ideas back unit to unit so we can master to a fuller level. We also want to look at our cross-curriculum teaching. We want our animal science teachers to understand what is being taught in English 9 and English 10 so that they can create curriculum that will improve our student outcomes. When we're looking at our pacing guides, we also want to protect our blocks of ELA and math. And how can we best do that and incorporate that into our cross-curriculum teaching? And when we're creating our pacing guides, we want to focus on important vocabulary. Now, a lot of people will say that vocabulary in math is only taught in math. But what if we get into chemistry? Chemistry has a lot of math involved in it. When we're creating graphs for biology, we're talking about slopes of lines and growth rates. So those are things that we can teach students that are the same class to class so they don't feel like they're having to learn it over again. And our curriculum can help us do that. Now, the purpose of instructional calendars and our pacing guides is to create that roadmap for teachers, students, and parents to know what students need to learn to be successful. It's also going to help us create scaffolding of learning to align teachers to the power standards, learning targets, and student outcomes. We also want to overlap critical skills to prevent gaps in sequencing across grade level and across subject areas. Now, in this slide, I used the power standards, learning targets, student outcomes. One of our goals here within our school is to create the vocabulary together of our learning targets and student outcomes. Those are things that we talk about, but we want each student, whether it's learning target, learning objective, but we want that vocabulary to be consistent throughout the school so that students know exactly when they come into the classroom what those outcomes are going to be with common language. Now, other purpose of an instructional calendar is to allow time to ensure learning targets and learning objectives are being taught to a level of mastery. And some of the ways we're going to do that with our learning targets, learning objectives, whatever language we come up that's common within our school, is to give that roadmap to students so that every time they're walking into our classroom for a unit or for a lesson, they're going to be able to answer these questions. And not just our students. We want our teachers, our students, and parents to be able to consistently answer, what will I be able to do when I finish this lesson or unit? What idea or subject is important for me to learn or understand so that I can do this? Now, example, in English 9, they end up quarter 1 by writing a definition essay. They need to be able to read the content and analyze the content in the book that they're doing in order to do that. They also need to know how to write a 5-paragraph essay and what's all included in writing that 5-paragraph essay. some of your kids haven't done that yet. So what supports do we need in place in our curriculum to make that happen successfully? And we also need to teach our students, what is a definition essay? What are the components that are different than just a regular essay? So all that learning needs to be packed into our curriculum in an appropriate pace so that our students can do those successfully. By the end of the unit, we also want our students to know, or another question we want our students to know is, how will I show that I can do this? And how well do I have to do that? So when we're developing our curriculum, we're going to develop rubrics just so students can know and understand how well they need to know to demonstrate mastery at their levels. So how can we do this? We're talking over and over about time, but we need you to understand that this isn't an overnight process. Creating a guaranteed and viable curriculum takes on average 3 to 5 years, depending on where a school is from the start. Now, we know that we've already started in our PLCs to align our curriculum outcomes to the state and district level standards. We've already got a foot in the door when we're starting this. We have effective teaching practices happening already. So some of it is just documenting some of the practices that we're already implementing. Now, how can we do this within our grade level PLCs and we already have content area PLCs that last year connected power standards. So what we are going to do over this next year is unit by unit creating those rubric level learning targets and rubric level common assessments. We need our students to understand the outcomes and where they're going so that they can get to that path and decide how they're going to get there with you in the curriculum. We also want to understand that our curriculum is going to include differentiation, interventions, and opportunity for extensions. By doing this, next year we're also going to implement grade level PLCs. We're going to rotate from content PLC to grade level PLC. Now, the purpose behind this is so that we can share those power standards for cross-curricular and grade level experiences. In doing this, we also want to examine our bundle options. Our freshmen have a bundle of world cultures, English 9, and health. We want to see what's working in those areas by exploring some of that data in the grade level PLC to see what we can implement in our curriculum. We're going to need shareouts on what's being taught to incorporate cyclical learning so that cyclical learning isn't just happening in English 9, it's also happening in their electives. We want to also continue with our teacher development and the opportunity to share out at our grade level PLCs because that creates it's going to help us build as a community within our team. How can we do this? Definitely not without you. Okay. Now, a few things that we need to know is there's always got to be an end game in mind. And when we do that, we're going to create that. But we have to know if we're on the right track when we're going through this process over the next few years. We know we'll be on the right track if our curriculum is aligned to the state and district standards, which are already starting to do. We're identifying those important standards that we feel are important. We're going to know that we're on track if that curriculum is focused to allow teaching in available time. In other words, putting those pacing guides into that curriculum. Third, we're going to look at all students will have an opportunity to learn that critical content that we defined in target number 1. Fourth, we'll have to establish clear and measurable goals and focus our critical needs of student achievement. What I mean by that is we want the goals of where we want to go by establishing this curriculum defined. If we're at this level this year, what do we hope by implementing by this curriculum we're going to achieve next year? And in order to do that, 5, we're going to analyze and interpret that data to monitor our progress. Are we seeing the growth goals that we set back in step 4? And in 6, we want to ensure that school level and classroom level programs and practices will be in place to help all students with intervention as we develop this to be on the right track. Now, this is a lot of information to take in. And again, please understand that we're here to support you. We know that this is going to create opportunity for teacher leaders. And we're going to know that our mastery level teachers are going to be in play here by sharing out what's working for them when they are showing and their classrooms are demonstrating student growth. And we're looking at incorporating those ideas within our curriculum and provide autonomy within your lessons to do that. We're going to be looking at how we can share our learning targets more effectively and how we can have our students reflect on if they're meeting the learning targets or if they need intervention. And again, some of that time's already happening in our PLC and our reflective process time. In our time that that 3-week monitoring progress time that we're talking about, where students are doing that self-reflection, and the 6-week intervention time, where we might need to create those directed interventions. So time isn't duplicated here. So we're looking at how we can implement our curriculum. Thank you for your time.